What is to follow is my interview with James Templeton. It's a long one, but I didn't want to cut it much because it is such an important topic that can help a lot of people. I've always admired James not only because even with a dire prognosis with stage 4 melanoma, he never gave up. And he did his research, and then when he chose a plan, he stuck to it. There are many different ways that people can get healthy after such a diagnosis. People have done many different things, although most of them share common traits. They all changed their lifestyle dramatically. They went to non-processed, healthy food. Most have gone organic. They've done supplementation of some sort, and they have detoxed. Not only detoxed the body, but detoxed their homes. From their cookware to their cleaning products. And then they detoxed from the inside out. So a lot of people have taken different approaches. James was a macrobiotic approach. I have included a macrobiotic story at the end of a person from Cleveland who is still alive and well almost 20 years later after a similar dire prognosis. And she followed the macrobiotic diet. This is not a how-to. It doesn't get into the specifics of what he did. He tells about what he did, but you can research everything he talks about. That video would probably take a 2-week period of time to do. So this is an inspirational story of somebody that did it. It can give people hope and let you know that it is possible. The other thing I'd like to mention that I'm not sure if James was using an external mic. You can see his voice audio sync is a little off, but if you can put up with that, the content is very important. So enjoy and see you in the next one. Okay, I'll do a little intro. Oh, I cut myself shaving.
I couldn't tell.
So I'm really thrilled today. I have someone on I'm going to introduce in a minute. I bought his CD years ago, his audio CD of his book, and I'm sure he'll talk about that. I have a special interest in the subject. Number one, we're from the little town of East Palestine, Ohio. Tens of thousands of gallons of cancer-causing chemicals were spilled into our land. I wanted to do something for the residents about prevention. We had one of the CDC doctors here giving a talk, and he told us at a meeting recently that those of us exposed to vinyl chloride, they didn't really have any way to get it out of our bodies, but they wanted us to be monitored closely because they can treat the cancers that may pop up.
The bottom line, people were exposed to toxic chemicals from the February 3rd train derailment. That cannot be changed. So early detection of any diseases will be the best way to stay healthy. The health of East Palestine, it's our top story tonight at 10.
Captain Jill Sugart of the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry told the 30 people at this evening's meeting in East Palestine what they are facing.
We don't know for certain if there will or won't be long-term health effects from these exposures.
Sugart was followed by Dr. Arthur Chang of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
There is no way to get rid of vinyl chloride from the body. There is no way to get rid of dioxin from the body.
Dr. Chang said the key for a healthy East Palestine will be early detection of any health issues, especially cancers.
We may not know how to get rid of vinyl chloride from the body, but we know how to treat those cancers.
Another reason that I'm thrilled to have James on today is my mother, many years ago, was taken too early. She was pretty much non-symptomatic, went to visit my sister in Florida, came down with a cough, and they found my sister took her to the emergency room, and they found a lump in her lung, and she was gone within 7 months. They were very optimistic about it at first, and they said they got it all. She went through her chemo, and I think it was her last treatment of chemo that we got the bad news that had spread throughout her body. And she was, although she had very little symptoms, a cough, I remember her saying to me before she passed that if she knew how sick she would have gotten from the chemo, she would have just gone on and lived her life. Now, I understand it's a personal choice, and there are many people that do fantastic with conventional treatment, but that was my mother's case. So I've been a fan of James for years now, since he started his site on YouTube, and that's how I discovered him. And James, I'm going to have you talk about yourself. You may want to talk about your Templeton list and your book first, and then I'd love to hear your story and share it with the residents of East Palestine and people all across the world.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rick, for having me today. It's like a pleasure, and I just feel for everybody in your town and area, because I mean, nobody likes something just dumped on them, basically, like what happened. I mean, it's just, and you're dealing with all this toxicity, so I really feel for everyone, and I'm sorry to hear about your mom, because whether people realize it or not, nearly 1 out of 2 of us is going to have cancer in our lifetime. It's getting like that. It used to be, I don't know, something like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, or whatever, back not too many years ago. Now it's like nearly half of us, and it's really scary. But people aren't really, and most people aren't really too worried about it until it just hits them, and then they have to deal with it. And usually we find out about it through conventional medicine, like you were talking about, and it's a scary thing when people find out that they have, those 3 words told to them: you have cancer. It's a very scary thing for most people. Some people say it wasn't, but I don't know if I believe that or not. It's
I think especially shocking in my mother's case. She was a non-smoker. And I think you thought you had some type of body armor because you stayed in such great shape, but it's not always being in shape. A cancer prevention.
I've been interviewing people and talking to people for the last, over 30 years now. And I haven't had this site that I have now, and Templeton Wellness didn't exist, but you learn over the years, and you kind of think, well, I mean, everybody's doing a little bit of different protocols and doing different things, and people are getting well and some aren't. But I kind of think that I know what really is the most important thing now for people. But I'll tell you a little bit, of that later probably. But I'd like to tell everybody about my book. I used to have cancer, how I found my own way back to health. I'll hold it up if I can. And this is my book. This is my story. I wrote this in 2019, and I wrote it because I got tired of seeing my friends and family and loved ones and my colleagues getting cancer. And I'm at the age now where a lot of people are getting cancer, and probably over half of them are dying of it. And it's like, I know there's a lot they could do. It's never too late. And these people, either they feel comfortable doing something different or they don't. All you can do is actually sort of like maybe just mention it and tell them a little bit about it, and then they have to make that decision. So Templeton Wellness is all about making decisions, is helping people to educate themselves and giving people hope, knowing that, hey, it's never too late. When someone says, or a doctor tells you, it doesn't look good, you got 6 months to live, or a year to live, or 2 years to live, or whatever, you don't necessarily have to believe them, because there's a lot of things you can do. They're looking at you as, just comparing you to other people. And this is what they see. And so they don't really know, but usually people want to know. So, and they might not even tell you at the beginning, but when you start asking and saying, look, I want to know, give me the, what I'm up against. And they'll tell you, and they're just going by their experience. But the thing about it is I wanted people to be able to educate themselves and step back for a minute when they're told those very fearful words that, let's step back. You didn't get this overnight. And even if they think you're not going to be around that much longer, step back for 2 or 3 days at least and start educating yourself. And that's what Templeton Wellness is about. And there's other people out there doing similar things, but it's about educating yourself. And when you find something that you feel in your heart and soul that sounds right for you, you'll know it. You don't have to be talked into it by me or your friend or your doctor. You need to go on your gut feelings and what you really feel and start to develop that intuition and making those decisions, with your own become your own guru, health guru and be in charge of your own health, take control, some people say. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. And that's why I started Templeton Wellness, because I wanted to give back. And I got to seeing my friends and I said, well, look, I think I can do something. I've got a story. I survived, 37 years this year. And I figure, hey, if I can do it, then why can't somebody else? You just got to make some changes. You gotta, look at your life and say, what have I been doing wrong? But first you got to know what you need to educate yourself a little bit and make a lot of changes, roll up your sleeves and do the work.
And often I think that when doctors give a prognosis, as you were talking about, if you got 3 to 6 months to live, they're basing it on what they see in their office on a daily basis using protocols.
Yes.
So even if a patient maybe they want to do a little bit of both, maybe they want to do traditional, but what's it going to hurt if they clean up their act and clean up their diet and some of these other things?
Yeah. The integrative approach is appealing to a lot of people. Let me find a doctor that's more integrated, more maybe preventative oriented for his clients, his patients that come to him, somebody that does maybe functional medicine testing, somebody that's really interested in preventing cancer in the first place or any other harmful health issues, trying to get to the root of the problem, but also is open to maybe a little of both. And sometimes that works good for people because maybe they have better support at home with that kind of decision, other than just going out and doing something totally different, and then everybody thinks you're nuts a little bit, like probably they might have with me. But the thing is that you have to learn and from trial and error a little bit, instead of just saying, well, I guess there's nothing else I can do. I'll follow this person or follow these people I'm following over the cliff. You don't have to do that.
Younger people are pretty savvy today, but where can people get your book?
They can get it at Amazon. TempletonWellness.com is our site. And I also have a restaurant guide, TempletonList.com, the healthiest restaurants in America, the best farm to table organic restaurants. So we've got over 5,000 restaurants. And this is just something I always wanted to do. This is all free. It's all, I don't make any money off of anything. It's all about giving back as much as I can, trying to help as many people as I can. And the restaurant guide is really easy to use. It's not an app, it's on a website, but it works pretty well. And you can use your phone or your computer, and it works off Google Maps, and it gives you directions and all that. And
so this is people that want to just eat healthy, or especially important for cancer patients as they're traveling.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always say if you have cancer and you're on a special diet, eat at home as much as possible because we want to make sure that you get the best food possible and you know exactly what you're putting into your system, you know, with as far as ingredients and everything. But these restaurants are the healthiest ones. They're not perfect, but if you're going to travel, if you're going to go on a business trip or a vacation, or you just want a night out, these are the best places. You still got to ask questions. You still got to know what you can eat and can't eat. But if a person just wants to be healthier and be on more of a preventative type program and lifestyle, this is a really good place to start.
Okay. Your story was so inspiring to me years ago. Can we start from the beginning?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a Texan. You can probably tell I got a little bit of a Texas drawl still, and I don't live in Texas all the time. I have a home in Texas, but I live in Idaho. But I've always, you know, been kind of a Texan at heart. But I grew up in Texas, and I really was doing very well, I thought. I was living on a small farm. I had this beautiful wife and a young child that wasn't even 2 years old, and I had several successful businesses. And I thought that life was going really good for me. I was a runner. I was exercising all the time, working out in the gym, doing what I thought was right. And I was one of these guys you'd see running down the highway all the time, and people would see me everywhere. Oh, I see you running all the time. You know, it was one of those kind of
And there's
guys.
a reason you were doing that, correct?
Yeah, well, the
Reason
reason
you
I
were
was
doing that.
Yeah, I was doing it because my grandfather and my father both died of heart disease at a very young age. And I didn't want to be the next one. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this, and maybe this will really keep me from having these heart issues, these family heart issues. But I was following a guy back then. His name was Jim Fix. And Jim Fix was a kind of a health fitness guru back then. He was a runner. And his father died at the age of, at a young age. I forget what the age it was exactly. But Jim got into running, and he felt that the running was going to save him from having any of these issues. And he wrote the book, The Complete Book of Running. And I started reading that, and I thought, well, I'm on the right track. I'm going to keep doing this. And if it's working for Jim, it'll work for me too. So one day I went to the office one morning. I grabbed a newspaper. I sat down at my desk, and I looked at it, and it says, running guru Jim Fix dies of heart attack while jogging
I remember
on the side of the road. And I went, oh my God, how could this happen? Am I reading this right? And so I started thinking right then. I was shocked. You know, I was just like, what am I going to do? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing now. And I was reading a couple of other books and following, you know, there's a diet called Eat to Win. I was on a kind of pretty much a vegetarian diet, and I was trying to keep myself thin and all that. And so I decided to go get one of these cardio stress tests done. So I made an appointment. I went in, I got on the treadmill test that they did, and I got on there, and then it slowly started, and it gets bigger, and faster and faster. So when I got off of that, the doctor says, oh my God, he said, James, he says, you broke the record. Nobody's ever done this well in the office. He said, you're in tremendous shape. He says, I don't know what all you're doing, but you better keep doing it because you're going to live a long time in the shape you're in. And he says, you know, let's check everything out. So he checked everything out and, you know, all that. He says, you're in really good health as far as I can see. And, you know, he says, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. And on the way out of his office, he says, you know, the only thing I could find wrong with you, because they're looking for something. And he says, there's a mole on your back that looks a little different. It's just, you know, oddly shaped a little bit. It looks different. He said, it's probably nothing to it, but he said, you know, why don't you check it out with a dermatologist when you get a chance? I wouldn't worry about it, but, you know, when you get a chance. So I didn't think much about it. And, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later, I thought, well, I better get it checked out just to see. So I go into the dermatologist's office, And when I walked in, he comes around. I had my shirt off. He says, "Let's see what you got." And he looks at it and he paused for a minute. He backed up. He started to get all excited and he started saying, "Oh my goodness." He says, "I think you have melanoma." And I'm like, "Melanoma? Oh, well, I didn't know a lot about melanoma. I'd heard the word and heard that it wasn't a good thing to have, but he starts going on and on about it and telling me, oh, like he discovered the Holy Grail or something, and he's like, "Oh, we might have to remove a large portion of the tissue on your back." He says, "We need to do surgery immediately." He says, "I think you have melanoma." He kept going on and on. He was so excited, almost like he was, I'm sure he'd seen it before, but it's just like really, it made me really upset. I was upset already. And I started to, say to myself, I got to get out of this place. I'm not going to work with this guy. I don't like his bedside manner. So I mumbled something to him like, I'm going to go home and think about it, and I'll talk to you later. And I left, and I was so upset. I drove home, barely felt like driving home. I drove home and I talked to my wife, and she says, "I think you should get a second opinion. It's probably nothing. This guy just overreacted and all that." So anyway, I ended up getting an appointment with the dermatologist that I'd been to before down in Houston. And then he looks at it and goes, "Well, it looks a little suspicious probably to me." But he says, "I'm going to send you to my friend. He's an oncologist and he's like world renowned. He's one of the best. He specializes in this. You got to go to anybody. He'd be the guy." Well, I kind of thought, well, that's probably lucky. I get to go see one of the best guys. So a couple of days later, I had an appointment, went in to see this guy. And he says to me, he says, "Look, why don't we, see what you got here?" And the same old thing. He looks at it and he goes, "Well, it looks suspicious to me. It probably isn't anything, but how are we going to know if we don't take it out? Let's just take it out right now." He said, "Lay down on the table." He says, "I can remove it right now and send you home, and then we'll send it to the lab and see what it is. That's the only thing I know to do." So he took a big old plug out of my back and he stitched it all up and everything. And he says, "Well, go on home. Don't worry. I'll call you in a few days and tell you what the lab says." Well, I went home. I worried. That's all I did was worry. And I was just worried, sick. I couldn't sleep. I was pacing the floor, and I just was a nervous wreck. And it took about 2 weeks or more before he called me. I was like, "Why is it taking so long? Oh my goodness." It was one of those. That's the worst part of it all right there. So you're worried. So then he calls me on the phone and he says, "James," he says, "I got some good news and I got some bad news." And he says, "The good news is you got melanoma." And I said, "Good news? How could this be good?" I'm thinking this. How could that be good? He goes, "Well, the good news is we think we got it all around the perimeter area of this sample that we took." He says, "That's good because we don't see any around the edges." He said, "The bad news is it's very deep, and it was in the deepest layers, down deep." He said, "We got to really keep an eye on this." He says, "Chances are it's going to spread, and we got to really watch it." He said, "This is what I call a stage 4, based on what they called the Clark scale." And he says, "So this could be very serious. We got to keep an eye on it. I want you to come every 3 months and we'll check it out." He said, "There's nothing else you can do." He said, just keep living your life, doing the things that you do." He says, "There's nothing you can do, but that." And he says, "Come in and see me in 3 months." Well, that's all I did was worry. I was, now I've got melanoma. I'm not the same happy-go-lucky guy, the ambitious guy. I didn't want to do anything. I felt sorry for myself now. I was in fear. And, I wasn't the same guy that people remembered, me in town. And I didn't even want to go to town. I didn't want to do anything. But Anyway, so after 3 months, I went back to see the doctor. Everything was fine. He goes, you know what? Chances are we'll never see this again. So he says, go on back, live your life. Well, I'd started talking to some of my kind of friends that are acquaintances that were doctors, and telling them what I had. And they go, well, one of the doctors said, well, stage 4 melanoma is not a good thing. Most people don't live over 3 years with that. People tell you all kinds of things. And I'm like, oh God, don't tell me that. So he's telling me that I'm 32 years old. But anyway, I go back to the doctor again, 3 months. Everything's fine. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it's going to be okay. So then what I did was I go home. I'm still just the same guy, still upset, still worried, still, just after 6 months or so, I'm really, not doing well, really. And my wife starts getting a little strange, and before I knew it, she left me. And she said, I'm moving into town. I'm taking my little girl and taking our little girl and moving into town. And I'm like, oh God, I can't believe this is happening to me. So anyway, I'm really stressed now. I don't care what happens, and I started going out and drinking and doing stuff like that with old buddies and stuff because I needed to get it off my mind. And that wasn't the good thing to do, but
You
that's,
were a successful businessman at this point.
yeah, I was. So I go, and then I'm taking a shower one morning, and I feel this lump in my groin, and it felt like a large marble, and I hadn't felt that before because, I was feeling around, because that's what you do. And all of a sudden I feel this. It just popped up. So I called the doctor. He says, come on in, let's see what it is. So I went in and he says, well, it's probably nothing to it. And long story short, he told me to go home and don't worry about it and just see what it does. Well, I went home, and after 2 or 3 weeks later, it was getting bigger and bigger. Here now it's like a golf ball almost. And I'm saying something's really wrong here. And I went back and he says, well, let's check in the hospital in the morning and see what it is. He said, it's probably not going to be much. We'll do a little incision. Maybe it's just a lymph node that's gotten irritated or something, And I didn't know. So anyway, I go in and I wake up from the surgery, and I knew I was in trouble because it wasn't some little incision. It was all these bandages. I had tubes sticking out of my leg. I just knew. And I'm laying there after the surgery and in recovery after I'd come to. Here comes the doctor through the door. And he was the guy that originally removed the melanoma. And he was the surgeon. He comes through the door and he says, well, I'm sorry to tell you, James, but he said the cancer spread. It's in your lymphatic system. He said, we removed all your lymph nodes in your right groin. He says, we're going to have to keep a real eye out. We might have to remove the other side, because it probably will spread over there over time. He says, I want you to do 80 chemotherapy treatments. And he said, this is experimental chemotherapy. Regular chemotherapy won't touch this stuff from my experience. He said, we're going to elevate your temperature. We're going to get it up to as high as we can without basically causing any harm. And once we get it elevated, then we're going to give you the chemotherapy through an IV drip. And we'll give you typhoid serum through an IV first. And then we'll get that temperature up, and you're just freezing to death when they do that because it's your body's on fire, but you feel like you're freezing to death. And then, weighted blankets because you're shaking. And I remember that. And it was like torture. And then they give you this IV. So it's about an 8 to 10 hour process. And he said that after you recover from the surgery, it's going to take about 3 weeks. Then we'll do the chemotherapy, and you just stay in the hospital the whole time. And, we want you to stay here because you're going to have to come into the hospital every 5 treatments. When you do 5 treatments, every 2 months, you come in, do 5 treatments. And then because it's pretty bad stuff. And he says, you're going to have to stay a couple extra days to recover from the chemotherapy. So then he goes on to tell me, well, he didn't want to tell me, but I said, what are my chances here? What's going on? I wanted to know. He goes, well, he said, your chances are you probably got about a 20% chance of surviving if you can get through this chemotherapy treatment. He said that's from 3 to 5 years, 20% chance of surviving 3 to 5 years. And he says, I said, what if I don't do the chemotherapy? He goes, well, probably won't have much time then. And he says, this is all I know to do. And he says, that's unfortunately, this kind of cancer is aggressive and it doesn't respond to a lot. And I mean, you have to remember this was, a long time ago. But he said to me, he says, but that's all I know to do. They keep saying that. So then I'm laying there, I'm miserable, I'm in pain, I'm on morphine, I'm doing all this because you're in pain from the surgery and all that. So I'm laying there and I think, I got to find something to do. I could die from this stuff. I got to find another answer, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm laying there in the hospital bed and I get a phone call out of the blue. Phone rings and I pick up the phone and the voice on the phone says, hey, James, this is Ron Sumter. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And he says, he was a minister at a church I went to from time to time. And he was a runner like me. He was an ex-professional baseball player. He was a tough kind of guy and he was, well liked. But he says, look, I'm sorry to hear you're in here. I've been praying for you and many people in town and the church have been praying for you. He says, James, he says, if anybody can beat this cancer, you can. He says, you're a tough guy. You're a runner. You know how to push yourself. You know how to, get busy when you have to and take care of business. And he says, I know you're going to beat this. He says, you just don't give up. He kept saying that. Don't give up no matter what you do. He says, you beat this SOB in cancer. And he didn't say it exactly like that. I just say it in a nice way, but he let it fly and it got my attention. And I felt like I was getting I was in the locker room at a sporting event or a football game and at halftime and the coach was getting on us, and I felt like that and it just got my attention. And I sat there and I said, I got to do something. I'm not going to give in to this. And after he hung up and I started to pray and I wasn't a guy that prayed a lot, but I started to pray and I prayed like I never prayed in my life before. And it felt like an out of body experience. It was like every cell in my body was praying and, for answers. And I knew there had to be something I could do. So after this prayer, I'm laying there, and I'm feeling a little calmer and everything. And I'm going to do whatever I can to get well. And then all of a sudden I get a knock on the door. And here comes a friend of mine through the door that I hadn't seen in 7 years. He was an old college buddy, an old running buddy. And we used to hang out together. And he comes through the door and he's got these papers in his hand. And he says, James, he says, I'm so sorry you're in here doing this is awful. He said, I heard about you from one of our old friends. And he said, a friend of a friend of a friend of mine at the office told me about a guy that healed himself of cancer using a diet and lifestyle. He said, I thought of you and the guy brought me the article and I thought, I think I'm going to go down there and give it to old James, and maybe it's something he can use, and he says, I don't know. I don't know if I should or not, but I'm going to go down there. Well, he's down there driving around by the hospital about that time when I was praying. And he told me he didn't know whether he should come in there or not. He was kind of, just something like, I don't know. Should I go in there? Should I get involved in this? I don't know about this. He was like that. And all of a sudden, he's driving down the street and he says, something just said, just go in there. Do it now. Quit talking about it. Just get out of the car, go in the hospital and give this to him and see him, and that's what happened. He comes in, he tells me that. And I just said, I'm going to do what you have in your hand. And it was about a guy that was a well-known guy, that he was an actor, and his name was Dirk Benedict. And Dirk Benedict was on a TV show called The A-Team. And the A-Team was for people that are probably, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember how many years it was back then. It was on
80s.
around that time, in the 80s. So old Dirk was one of those guys, one of those three guys on the A-Team, these what was his name? Mr. T and
It might have been George Peppard as well.
Yeah, George Peppard and all that. So anyway, he comes in and he's got that and he tells me about this. And I said, I'm going to do exactly what's in that article. I just knew. I said, he goes, well, you don't even know anything about it. And I said, I don't need to. I know I'm supposed to do that. I felt that, like in my heart and soul. And he handed me the papers and I started to read it. And it was about him doing this diet called the macrobiotic diet and in lifestyle. And I didn't know. I said, have you ever heard of macrobiotic? Have you know anything about that? And he goes, no, I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And I said, well, I don't either. But he ate this diet. Will you go out and get me this book? He says, yeah, sure. I'll go find it for you if I can find it. He went out and he came back a couple hours later with the book. And we didn't have Amazon and all that stuff back then, but I guess he found it in a bookstore. But he came in with that book and I couldn't put it down because, I wanted to do what he did. And I started to relate to him because he was from Montana. He grew up on a ranch in Montana. And I had a little ranch myself, I guess, or farm. And I had cows and all that. And I thought, well,
grew up on a ranch.
Yeah, he did. And then I grew up in the city, but then I ended up living out and I had my own little place with cattle and stuff. And I'm thinking, I can relate to this guy. We're kind of kindred spirits. I'm gonna do what he did. So I got excited. I'm reading all this, and I read as much as I could, and then I got excited. I started to get this feeling like, hey, I'm gonna beat this. If anybody's gonna beat it, I'm gonna beat it. I started having that feeling, and I remember what Ron told me on the phone. And then I started looking what Dirk was a tough guy, and he did all this stuff. So
I'm not sure you mentioned the name of the book.
Confessions of a Kamikaze Cowboy.
I read the book. It's a good book.
Yeah, it's different. It's a little different, but it tells about his story. It tells about how he went across the country and was eating out of cornfields. He went to see Michio Kushi, and Kushi I worked with and got to be really close with. But this came a little later. So I'm in the hospital. I'm excited now. And the next day I got another knock on the door. And here comes my stepmother through the door. And she's waving a book around and, walking in with this book. And she's saying, look, I've got this book that one of our relatives sent me. And she said, it's very interesting. It's about vitamin C and cancer. And it's by Linus Pauling. And I didn't know who Linus Pauling was. I didn't know anything about any of this. And I started looking at it. It started talking about people using high-dose vitamin C that were terminally ill, a lot of them with cancer. And, and a lot of these people survived as long as they took high-dose vitamin C. And I'm like, gosh, if this will help them, then it'll help me. Because, it started talking about all the positive aspects of taking high-dose vitamin C with cancer and how it was anti-cancer and all this stuff. And it just made sense to me. And I'm going to do that too. So I'll do the diet, I'll do the vitamin C, and I'll do the chemo because, heck, a little's good, a lot's better. I mean, that's where I was at that point. And I'll show them all. That's kind of how I started to feel. So then the next day, I'm excited. I was all depressed and everything. And here comes a guy through the door with another knock on the door the next day. And he comes through the door and he's a psychotherapist. And he's a psychotherapist from the hospital. And he introduced himself. He came through the door and he says to me, he says, hey, James, I hear you've had a rough time and, you've been a little down and out and depressed, maybe a little. And he says, I'd love to come talk to you. Maybe we can just sit down and have a talk. Is that something you will do? And I said, sure. And he says, can I come back in the morning? And he said, yeah, yeah, sure. Come on back. Well, I'm laying there, there's nothing else going on. So anyway, he comes through the door the next day. The door is always kind of cracked open a little bit, and the nurse is coming in and out and all that. And he's like, hey, James, good morning. He comes through the door, and I said right off the bat, listen, I want to ask you a question. He was, almost over to the bed. I said, have you heard of something called macrobiotics? It's actually a diet. It's a lifestyle. It's called macrobiotics. And he just turned around like, where's he going? I mean, he went towards the door. He went out in the hall. I thought, I guess I said the wrong thing. He's really thinks I'm nuts, and he's gone. He went out there and went around outside, and he comes back in, shuts the door tightly. He comes in, he says, yes, I have heard about it. He sat down next to me. He says, I've heard about it, and I know a lot of good things about it. He says, it helps a lot of people. He says, I've known people that have done very well on the macrobiotic diet with cancer. He said, it's tough, though. It's a hard diet because you got to do a lot of cooking and roll up your sleeves. It takes a lot of doing. He said, it takes the right kind of person to do it. It's not for somebody that wants to do something quick. It's a whole lifestyle. He said, I tried it, just because I thought it sounded good. And he said, I couldn't stick with it because it just took too much of my time. But he says, you seem pretty determined. By the way, you don't seem depressed like I thought you would be. And because I was getting excited. And he says to me, he says, look, you got to roll up your sleeves. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way. He said, you got to stick with it. You can't veer away from it. You can't cheat. You got to follow the diet. You got to do the exercises. You got to do everything. The people that I've talked to do well. They really stick with it. It's not something you can do in a month or two. You really, and he went on and on about, you got to do it the right way, and I remember that. And I said, then, I'm really on to something. Here's this guy doing this stuff in secrecy. And these other guys have done this in the vitamin C book. So I'm going to do this. As soon as I get out of the hospital, I'm going to get started on this. I got to get going here. And so anyway, so now I'm excited. Now I've got hope. I'm getting people to find me books that I can read. And I'm still in there recovering from the surgery. And then as soon as they were ready, I started doing chemotherapy. And I mean, this was bad. It was like really bad. And the doctor would come in and saying, well, we hope you respond positively to it. If you don't, that's not good and all that. And I was sick and all that, but it was, and I'd had surgery, but I made it through it. So I made it through, and then I went home. And then I started to try to get on the macrobiotic diet a little bit. And I was actually had a job after my wife left me. I walked away from our businesses and I started working with some other guys because I still had energy and I had a business background, but I was had another job going on with a couple of other friends. And, I thought, well, I had to make a little money. And then I thought, I'd get my mind off of things. So anyway, after I left the hospital, I went to my mother's for a while, my stepmother's, and she lived out on her farm and about a little over an hour from downtown Houston. And I went out there and I stayed with her and we started trying to cook brown rice and beans and just simple stuff. And so until I could get and go back up to Dallas is where I was living and working. So anyway, I was there and then I went up there, and before I knew it was 2 months, it was time to go back and get the other chemotherapy. I had started eating as much as I could macrobiotically, and I couldn't run anymore. But what I could do is barely walk. So I started to walk, as much as I could do and try to do some of these breathing exercises that they talked about. but it was very hard on my leg, was swell, and I had to do a leg pump. It was a lymph drainage pump. I had to do that several hours every day because of the lymph glands all being gone. So, and my leg would swell up and all that. So I had to do that, and that was a pain. But that's something I had to do, or I could have lost my leg. So here I'm doing that, and I'm walking. But then I realized, and trying to work a little too. And so I realized that I couldn't walk very well, but I bet I could ride a bicycle. So I went in to a bike shop, and I bought me a 10-speed bicycle. And I went out to a place called White Rock Lake. It's outside of Dallas. I mean, close to not far from downtown Dallas. And it was, I don't know how many miles, I can't remember, but I rode around this lake, and it was a nice bike trail, and there was a lot of people biking. But I could barely get my leg over the thing, but I could ride. I found I could ride without putting all that weight on my leg. And I started riding. I worked up to 100 miles a week riding.
Wow.
And I was sick, nauseous, all that. And, was thin, really thin, and felt nauseous a lot. But after about 2 months, I started feeling a little better. And I just started a little bit of the vitamin C, not a lot yet. I was just trying, it takes time to get started. So I go back and do the chemotherapy again. And I am there, and they must have doubled or tripled it, because I'm laying there. I've never been so sick in my life. And they really gave it to me this time. And here I am laying there and lethargic. I couldn't keep anything in my stomach. I was throwing up. It was awful. And just felt like, just ached all over and everything from that stuff. And I remember after a couple of days, I was laying there, and I heard the nurse once say, "Oh my God, who's watching this patient? His temperature's way too high. He could die in here. You got to get in and cool him down now." And they came in there with these ice packs and all these, all this stuff. I don't remember. I was so out of it. I was just like drifting off. Yeah. And they came in and started cooling me down. And, and that scared me. And I said, I got to get out of here, because, every night somebody was dying in the hallway. They'd bring them down, and I could hear people moaning and groaning in the rooms. People were in a lot of pain, and it was all cancer people. And a lot of them had surgery and all kinds of stuff. And so they weren't dying of the cancer. They're dying of pneumonia and kidney failure, because I started asking questions and finding out from, it was a Catholic hospital, and these nuns would come in, and they would talk to me, and then, I'd say, what happened? I mean, what's all the commotion? And, it'd be during the night. Well, so-and-so passed away. And I went, oh my God, it's like, so I thought I'm going to be next. So anyway, the doctor comes in. I say, "Doctor, I feel so bad. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I feel awful." He goes, "Well, I'm sorry. You're just not responding. Your body's not responding. Yeah, I'd hope that you could respond better." But he says, "That's what the problem is." And I said, "But doctor, I've got to get better." And he goes, "Well, we're gonna keep working with you." So he kept on. Here another couple of days, I was really, really weak. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I was so weak, and I was losing weight. You lose a lot of weight on that. Well, I was. And already I was just like, really, really lost a lot of weight. And so I said to him, "Look, this is really bad. I don't know. I've never felt this bad in my life." I said, "Isn't there something else I could do?" He goes, "No, I don't know anything else you can do." I said, "Well, what about, a diet, vitamin C, things like that?" He goes, "Oh, that stuff doesn't work." And he says to me, "That's just a waste of time." Then he says to me, "I just don't know what else I can do for you." And I said, "Well, what would you do if it was your son or daughter?" He goes, "Well, I'd do the same thing." And I said, even if they don't get better," he goes, "Well, that's all we know to do." And I said, "But doctor, I could die in here from this stuff. People are dying at night in the hallways." He goes, "Well, He goes, we're all going to die someday, just like that. And I just got so mad, and I raised up and I said, listen here, you SOB, if I could get out of this bed, I'd tear you apart, and I was furious at him. And he turned around like he'd seen a ghost. And he walked out that door, and I never saw that doctor again, because I made up my mind right then I was going to get the heck out of that hospital. And the next night, I got, in my clothes, regular clothes, because I had a hospital gown on and all that. And I snuck out at 2 a.m. to the hospital. And I looked down the hall and I didn't see anybody. The nurse's station was down. And I said, I'm going. I went, snuck down the hall and down the stairs and to my car that was out in the parking lot. I drove off. I never looked back. And I made up my mind right then. I said, I am never going back to that place. If I die, it's not because I didn't try. I'm going to give it 150%. I'm going to, scratch, kick, claw, whatever it takes. I'm fighting this like I never fought anything in my life. I'm gonna change my diet completely. I'm going 100% on the diet, the vitamin C, and if it doesn't work for me, it's not because I haven't tried my very best. And that's kind of that's how I did. I'm still here to be talking about it. And then, of course, I made a lot of changes and learned a lot. A lot of
James,
things I talk about.
You cut your chemotherapy treatments short. You only did.
Yeah, I did 10 treatments.
10 of 80 treatments recommended,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
And what happened is I went ahead and did the 10. I got through the 5, and then they wanted me to stay a couple of more days, so that you can recover and kind of, because you're weak and all that, and they try to get you back on your feet, and then they send you home. But I said, I ain't staying around. I didn't want to talk about it to them, because they were going to say, oh, no, you can't. No. And I just knew by then I've had it. I'm out of here. Their attitude was like, there's nothing else we can do but this. And my body wasn't responding. And I didn't want to stick around and see what was going to happen next. But that's just me. A lot of people would probably think, oh, well, you should have stuck it out. But I just know. I'm the kind of guy that as soon as the surgery's over, I want to get on something. And I've learned that that's important for people. Don't fool around and say, well, I'll go home. I won't worry about life. Maybe they got it all, and 2-3 years later, it's everywhere.
Yes.
You got to get serious about it. And no matter what you do, and start to look at what really causes this stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe you can say with melanoma, it's the sun. Maybe it's this, but it's really ultimately, it's your immune system. Mm-hmm. It's ultimately your toxicity. It's melanoma is an eternal thing, and people get it on areas where they've never even seen the sun. It's very aggressive cancer, but there's a lot of other cancers that are probably more aggressive even. But the thing is that you realize that this didn't happen overnight. It's a lot of things. And I looked at my lifestyle. It wasn't good. I ate pretty much vegetarian. And I wasn't supporting myself. I was running. I was tired all the time. But before that, I was exposed to lots of chemicals. I worked in the petrochemical. I had gas stations. I had 3 different gas stations, and one of them I worked at every day, pumping gas for at least a shift every day. It was a full service, and it was just one car after another, and you're breathing all that stuff.
Yeah,
and then
it's one of the most carcinogenic compounds, benzene compounds.
Yeah. And then before that, I used PVC glues because I was a pipe fitter, like plastic pipe, like irrigation. And for 7 years, I worked outside during college and in the summers, sitting there doing this, you're sitting there and this fumes coming up and you're breathing this stuff. And, it's like you're out and you're not eating well and you're drinking too much. It's just everything, so you're not conscious about anything when you're young a lot of times, and you think that nothing will ever happen to you, and then you're stressed out and you're in maybe a stressful relationship. I realize that now, but you're in a stressful relationship because it's not, somebody leaves you, it's not just them, it's partly you too. And there's a lot of, it's stress. You're stressed with that. There's stress. I had a lot of death in my family. My father died. My mother died at a young age. My brother died at a young age. It's stressful. All that stuff, and you think you're next. For years, I thought I was next. And that's why I didn't even care. When I was in college, I didn't even give a flip. I just wanted to have a good time and kind of self-medicate. But then I started, thinking later, I matured a little bit and said, I gotta do something with my life. How am I going to make a living? So that's when you start to turn yourself semi around, but you've done already got a lot of damage done, and now you're beating yourself up on the pavement, not supporting yourself properly. Eating raw food all the time and very little protein, and you're running 60 miles a week in the hot Texas sun, and you're out there, and it's like, and you're tired all the time. I worked all the time. It's like you're fixing fence and feeding cows and feeding dogs and hogs and on a farm, and you're all that.
For the layperson, if someone is diagnosed with cancer, for the layperson, their mind immediately goes to the treatments, chemotherapy.
Yeah.
But some people may be skeptical about what you're talking about. It is the environment of your body, the immune system, that really fights this villain, this cancer. So a lot of people, I think, in America that think of cancer treatments, all they think of is the actual chemotherapy or whatever protocol they're on conventionally.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, it breaks my heart because I've been doing this for 30 years and treated thousands of patients, and you see people that become your friends and they end up doing the conventional, which is okay, but they want to keep living the way they're living, and they want to keep smoking, they want to keep drinking, they want to keep doing their things, and you can almost see it coming. It's like a slow car crash, and then you hear year, 6 months, a year and a half later, it's back. So
yeah, you're exactly right. And we live in a world where people want everybody to do everything for them, and they you get cancer, well, I guess he knows what he's doing, he's got the white jacket on, and he's been to medical school, and he's been to this, and he knows, and maybe he does, but that the chemotherapy is so harsh on people's immunity, and it kills cancer cells, but it also kills your own good cells in your immune system. And a lot of people, that, let's say you have stage 1 cancer, which is a very early stage, or maybe some are like not even 1. Let's say you have that. Well, a lot of people do well with that, maybe even 2. And they're kind of like, well, I did chemotherapy and I did surgery and I've done all this stuff and I have no sign. I've been around 10 years or whatever, and I'm fine. But, they think. But the thing is that when you have stage 4 cancer, which a lot of people are getting nowadays, they basically say it's not if, it's when, and it's kind of like, is it going to be this year, next year, or the year after? Kind of like that. And we'll fill you full of drugs and fill you full of all this stuff. Maybe we can prolong your life, by a few months or whatever. But that's kind of their way. And they've got these drugs you see advertised, and we'll keep you around for, you can enjoy your grandchildren for another year, hopefully, or whatever. But that's not the way I want to look at things. I want to look at what caused this in the first place. Is it impossible for someone not to get well? And the thing is, I've discovered, after interviewing so many people and after being and living in environments where the majority of the people living there had cancer or had cancer, like the Cushing Institute, which I eventually moved to. And, every day, every week, people were coming in there, and sometimes we had 50 or 60 people living there. And they were, had all kinds of different stories, but you learn, that the thing is, you got to make changes, some kind of changes, because what you've done in the past is why you're like that. People go, well, my mother had it, my father had it, or whoever. But the research shows that 90% of it's self-induced. You know, 10% is inherited, and there's tendencies that we inherit. You know, maybe our mother ate too much sugar and ate a lot of this and a lot of that and smoked and drank too much. And so, you know, I kind of picked up the habit and I'm doing all that. And it's, you know, it's acceptable in the family, you know, because we all do those things. And so, you know, it's like you said, I mean, well, I like to say they're like walking time bombs. You know, we all don't know. Nobody knows what's going on all the time in our bodies. But the problem is that you've really got to do something, and you got to, you know, I believe it's diet, it's detox, supplementation, and then it's, you know, it's an attitude, it's a mind over matter mentality, it's feed the spirit, whatever you want to call it, you know, kind of thing. And I believe the last one is probably the most important thing of all. It's really truly believing in what you're doing. And it's kind of like, I believed after that prayer that I was going to find something, and that started it all. But then I started to believe because I started to see other people, and I thought, well, if they can do it, why can't I? You know, I didn't know a lot about it, but I started to believe that there was hope for me, that believe that I could do it, and I would just keep fighting until I couldn't find anything else to do. And I started to believe in myself. And I believe that these people that get well, it's all, a lot of it is here. It's believing in something, whether it's spirituality, whether it's, you know, praying, whether it's, you know, meditating, whether it's visualization, whether it's, you know, researching, becoming your own health guide, you know, being, you know, educating yourself, thinking, you know, being around like-minded people, whatever it takes. But this starts to kick in once you start to see some results happening. You start to feel better. That's the number one thing. But when this starts to kick in, you know, you start to believe. And I believe that's when the healing really starts, because I've interviewed so many people, and a lot of them are saying, well, I did this and I did that. Well, I've done a lot of things. I continue to do things because I want to see what seems to work. Because, I mean, it's like sort of the battle never ends in life. You know, it's like we all want to stay healthy, or you should, because if you don't have your health, believe me, it's nothing else really matters. All the money in the world, or, you know, having all the money in the world, and if you're sick and don't feel well, I don't think it really matters to most people. But it's like being a person that starts to see and believe in what they're doing. And it's kind of like people that play golf or whatever. The good golfers are the ones that can control this and believe in themselves, and, you know, and see and believe, and, you know, think that, hey, you know, Tiger Woods was like that. He could, you know, he can out believe anybody. I believe that I'm going to win this thing, you know, and nobody's going to beat me.
That trait may also, it boosts the immune system with a good attitude, but that trait of the person having a good attitude allows them also to investigate and research on their own. Again, getting back to your point where people just trust someone else.
Yeah.
Positive type attitude keeps them open to other avenues as well.
You're right. And that's the key. And then once you find a diet that you feel makes sense to you, and you gotta kind of like it too. And I mean, maybe you want it at the beginning, but you know, if somebody's trying to get you to eat something that just makes you sick to think about, it might not be the right diet. But, you know, a diet that's especially low in sugar is important. Low in you know, I mean, glucose feeds cancer cells. I mean, and a lot of, and glutamines, which are in certain foods, but it depends. I've seen a lot of people say that one diet doesn't fit all for cancer. You get, you know, some of the doctors that have tremendous results with people, you know, believe in different ways of determining the right diet, whether it's an autonomical nervous system, parasympathetic or sympathetic dominant diets, like the late Nicholas Gonzalez, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez.
Kelly,
His work, Dr. William Donald Kelly's work originated a lot of this. And
now they do eat fruit, but it's a natural fruit. It's a sugar. It's a natural, they do sugars. And then others eat meat in that diet as well.
Yeah, it depends, because a lot of people that have certain cancers, even like the kind of cancer I had, they recommend meat for a lot of those people, because a lot of them might be parasympathetic dominant. And if it's like a hard tumor kind of cancer, a lot of times it's more vegetarian with smaller amounts of animal protein, for those people. But somebody that has more of a immune type cancer, which would be, lymphomas and leukemia and myelomas and even melanoma can be in there. Sometimes people say melanoma is somewhere in the middle, but it, I think what I did very well now, I follow a diet. I don't follow as strict of a macrobiotic diet anymore, but I did it for 6 solid years.
6 years.
And I was so strict. And I chewed my food. They always said, chew your food 50 times. Well, I don't know where I got it, but I chewed my food 180 times. And I mean, people go, how could you chew food 180 times? But, we're eating whole grains and we're eating back then, and what people still do, if they follow it, you don't hear as much about it as you used to, because grains kind of has gotten a bad rap because of the the carbohydrates and the heavy metals and found in grains, from arsenic to cadmium and all that. But
the glyphosate,
and the glyphosate, there's ways of getting around that. But the thing is it's so high in cruciferous vegetables and allium vegetables, which they're all cancer fighting, and they're so detoxifying because of the fiber and the chlorophyll. They start to move those heavy metals out, whether, the chemicals and the heavy metals out of your system. And, that's, and the seaweed, they eat, sea vegetables. I guess some people say seaweed sounds terrible, but, they're anti-tumor and tumor suppressive, and they're very high in minerals. And it's such a good, clean diet. But it takes a lot of doing. You got to cook a lot. But sometimes I think cooking for yourself, you're putting sort of love back into the food. You're putting good energy. You're starting to, take responsibility, I guess you could say, for your own health by doing this, cooking for yourself. And who could do a better job cooking more than yourself, because what you can have, what you're putting in it. And if you need, and you're going to be more satisfied. But a lot of people that eat sort of a little here and a little there, they're not satisfied. They eat too much fruit. And fruit has, certain nutrients and phytonutrients and things that are really healthy for people, but there's too much sugar in fruit. So people can overdo, especially at the beginning. When you get on your way and you're doing really well a few years down the road, maybe a little more of everything, because your body is, but how to stay in the middle of the path, on the path, and you know what to do. And if you have if you start getting a little out of balance, because cancer is really, the body is out of balance.
Yes.
And it's just trying to bring itself back. And one of my teachers, Dr. Hazel Parcells, which was, she lived to 106, and she actually worked with William Donald Kelly when he had his cancer. She was the woman that worked with him. You didn't never hear about her.
Interesting.
But she was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was one of my teachers, and I used to sit with her, and she was over 100 when I met her. But I talk a little bit about her in the book. But she looked at me and she says, honey, you got to start eating meat again. I said, doctor, I can't eat meat. She says, you're going to get sick if you don't. She said, you're too thin. Your color's not right. You've been on this diet too long. You had melanoma. Now listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. I remember that. So I'm looking at her, and here she's 102 or something then, and she wasn't in a wheelchair or on a walker, like sharp. And I said, who's going to lie? Who's going to not listen to her, And so I started eating a little more animal food. I thought I would never, never again, ever, because I was so strict. And maybe occasionally eat a little fish, but I was also careful of the mercury and, in the fish. So, but there's things you can do for that. You just gotta educate yourself. But I felt so satisfied when I started to add a little more protein, to my diet and a little more essential fatty acids to the diet. And it made a huge difference for me. I started to gain a little weight. And then, of course, I went on a parasite cleanse, detoxification program, which, I didn't know. And I'd had a lot of animals and they always had parasites. And I was always having to deworm my cattle and my dogs. Every time I'd go to the vet, that's the first thing the vet would check for. That's the last thing a medical doctor checks for. And I always remember my friend was one of the veterinarian that I saw was one of my friends. And he said to me, he says, look, he said, the first thing is we got to get the parasites out of your dog because he's not gaining weight the way he should. His mineral imbalance is low. And he's not going to absorb until we get that stuff out of him. That's why I do this. We have to do this. Most dogs are rooting around. They're getting roundworms, the scarus, in their system. And he said, or hookworms or whatever. He said, and it really keeps them from being able to be as healthy as they should be. It's just like your cattle. If you have cattle and they're not as fat and they're not as healthy looking, usually it's because they've got some kind of parasites. But that's the last thing. So I learned about that before I met Dr. Parcells, but then I met her and she was really into that. And it's interesting, and then I learned about some things back then that like mistletoe, which was something I felt that really helped me. And it was called Iscador, which was mistletoe. And I injected myself in my spleen area for a year with this. And I got it out from Germany. I was working with a anthroposophical medical doctor that was Rudolf Steiner, was a philosopher and out of Germany. And
those that don't know, that's geared toward, part of it's geared toward creating an immune response in your body.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it made you feel like you had the flu for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then you feel better and better. And I went to see one of the doctors because a friend of mine says, "Hey, look, you're doing well on the macrobiotic diet. I think it's time to start looking, elsewhere a little bit, are you open to that?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm open." So he took me to this doctor, and the doctor says to me right off the bat, he did a bunch of tests and stuff. And, he says, "I think you're doing really well. I think you don't have an issue anymore." But he said, "The issue you have is that your body and your spirit have separated." And I was like, okay, let me think about that one a little bit. But he said, that's the real problem that's caused you to have all these issues. He says, we got to get that back together. He said, that's why I want you to do Iscador. And so I started doing it. And I never quite at that time realized what he was talking about. But, you're not going to hear that from most doctors.
And that was still while you were on the macrobiotic diet.
Yeah. And because I believed in what I was doing, but there was a disconnect, from, so my spirit was needed to be repaired a little bit more. But I guess this really brings everything together. But I did it for a whole year, and then I stopped, and then I left the macrobiotic community in the Northeast, and then moved out to New Mexico. And that's where I met Dr. Hazel Parcells and changed my diet a little bit. And then I met Ann Louise Gittleman and we became a couple. And she was a writer and a nutritionist, and was very well connected to a lot of people around the country, and sort of help me in an enormous amount of ways to find some other things that I could do, and introduce me to a lot of the things like colonics and coffee enemas and things like that, and supplements, lots of different supplements that were good, other than vitamin C. And to this day, I still take large amounts of vitamin C.
So James, for the first 6 years, you did the macrobiotic diet, vitamin C, you did some Iscador.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, there weren't much supplements there other than the vitamin C. Just very, very clean diet. A very intense program that anybody wants to research, and I'm sure they could research the macrobiotic diet. What do you do now as a diet? What's your basic?
What I do now is sort of like Anne Louise wrote a book, and she had a diet out it's still out there, but it was called the Fat Flush Diet. And the Fat Flush Diet it's similar kind of to a paleo diet. This was before a lot of the diets you hear about now, but it had to do with detoxifying the liver and the lymph, supporting the lymph in the liver, and eating like low carbs, eating like nuts and seeds, good essential fatty acids, lots of vegetables, lean proteins, mostly good, healthy, lean proteins, fish, a little chicken, a little turkey, organic. Everything's organic that we eat. Occasionally I eat red meat now, and I don't eat bread. I don't eat, hardly ever eat fruit. Occasionally some. We stay away from like gluten pretty much, and that's kind of my diet that I follow. It's kind of like a paleo diet. It's really anti-yeast and fungal, and I find that that's really a big issue for most people. A lot of the people that I've interviewed think that cancer is a fungus. Cancer is like candida, and I mean, I've interviewed Dr. Tullio Simoncini out of Italy, and he says that's what it is, totally what it is. And I've interviewed other people that feel, but for years I worked. I had my own microscope. There was a doctor by the name of Robert Bradford that was there was a company that he used to own, a company, and he had a clinic and hospital down in Tijuana, Mexico, and it was called American Biologics. And they're not in business any longer, but he's passed away, but he had a microscope system. It was a live blood system that he developed, similar to some of the old German systems. But anyway, I went and studied with him. I wanted to know more, so I started studying with him, and I bought a microscope and started working with people as an experimental kind of study for me, because I wanted to see for myself and see what really, the blood doesn't really lie if you know what you're doing. And I learned, and I was the only layperson in the classes there for several weeks. They were doctors from around the globe wanting to learn his system. So I really learned a lot, because when I started to look at someone's blood, I found that probably the biggest issue that was really affecting most people, it was parasites, yeast, fungus, heavy metal toxicity, vitamin C deficiency, endocrine system deficiencies, adrenal burnout, allergies, hormone imbalances. But the real key was the parasites, the yeast, the fungus, heavy metals. A lot of it's in the mouth, and it's the dental stuff. You got to deal with your dental issues. You got to deal with the toxicity from mercury amalgams, from root canals, from the bacteria, anaerobic bacteria from teeth that's been extracted without that have been extracted in an improper way. So the teeth is a huge deal. So people that have cancer, they really got to look at the parasites. They got to look at the yeast. They got to look at the fungus of gut health, and they've got to look at their the heavy metal toxicity levels,
James,
because it's all affecting their immune system.
I find it interesting that we're almost apologetic that talking about cooking for ourselves, which becomes so much convenience oriented that, it's basically how we used to live in decades and decades ago, cooking your own meals. But in the time that we have left, I'd like to ask you certain subjects to just kind of give some hope or prevention, or maybe somebody dealing already with cancer. I know that toxicity, detoxing, I did kind of describe it as if you're walking down a dark alley with your buddies. You get attacked. The last thing you need is your buddies to be hitting you in the back too. So while you're fighting this off, this cancer or any problem like that, even simple things that people don't think about, like their cookware, their microwaves, they normally use in their home. Did you change that as well?
Yes, you've got to throw out the microwaves.
We don't have
that destroys. That destroys their enzymes, and you've got to use good cookware, because a lot of it's leaching out heavy metals, nickel and copper, too much copper, nickel,
and the
and chromium and all this stuff. And look, we want to get rid of these heavy metals that are in our system. We don't want to keep adding them to our system. We've got to get our teeth out. We got to clean up our act. We got to throw out all the stuff in our house that's toxic, and start using natural products that are and do your research, because just because it says it's or something you buy in a health food store doesn't mean it's the best product. And but you got to detoxify. And something I really like, I think is probably one of the best things for anybody with cancer, is a sauna, an infrared sauna.
Yes.
And if a person could do it, if they're really weak, you got to start off easy, but maybe a day a week, and then maybe 2 days a week, maybe up to 3 or 4 days a week. And you start to really eliminate a lot of the toxicity, the heavy metals. And you got to drink a lot of water, but good, healthy, purified water. And I like a water that it's been filtered, and the minerals aren't destroyed, like reverse osmosis kills all your minerals. And, it's like drinking almost like distilled water. So if you're going to drink anything like that, you got to add minerals. You got to trace minerals, something good, an organic source of minerals, because the body needs those minerals. But the thing is like the sauna is wonderful. Colonics is, colon hydrotherapy is a really good way. Maybe you start off with a couple of, for every week for a little bit, work with somebody, what they call a series. And then maybe once a week for a while, until you really start to get rid of a lot of this toxic overload that's basically, keeping your immunity from doing its job. Because everybody's got cancer cells. I mean, even kids. And it starts to build up, because the immune system is not able to take care of it anymore, because it's overloaded. It's got the yeast, it's got the parasites, it's got the heavy metals, it's got the chemicals, the pesticides, everything. And so we got to go in and start to clean house. And then, there's a lot to it. That's why you got to really read and educate yourself, for everyone. It's critical. But the thing is that you start somewhere. And there's certain kind of things that are non-negotiable when it comes to overcoming a cancer diagnosis, in my opinion. And these things we're talking about are non-negotiable. it's your diet, it's your detox program, and it's supplementation, because there's anybody that's had surgery, anybody that's just been diagnosed, you need to learn about vitamin C. IV vitamin C is probably the best place, and oral vitamin C, but you want a vitamin C that's very well absorbed. There's some good ones out there. There's a lot of them that aren't. A good time release is good because it slowly releases, because you just end up peeing it all out. But there's some out there that are up to 80% absorbed, and it's almost as much as an IV. But you can do maybe start off with maybe 25,000 milligrams IV and work up to maybe up to 50, maybe every week, or I don't know, work with somebody that knows. But you can, some doctors go up to 100,000 milligrams a day, and there's no real problems with that.
Oh, yeah,
but you got to work up with it, got to work up to things, because don't just go crazy at the beginning, And then, there's also a lot of these supplements that have been shown to really be effective against cancer. But I haven't found one thing, maybe vitamin C. Vitamin C is probably, to me, because it helped me, I really felt like that's probably what helped me as much as anything. But if you take, certain supplements like that are out there, and there's a lot of them out there, and I talk about it in my book, and we talk about it all the time. We can't get into all of them, but if you start doing your research, you'll find things that are very, very important. And I think somewhere on my site, I give the top 10 things I do to stay cancer free. And I did that. I do a lot more than that, but I did that because I wanted people to see that, hey, if you're going to do just 10 things, this might be the place to start, or it's not so like, oh, I just want to be on a preventative protocol or something. So, it just made sense to do that. But you can find it on Templeton Wellness there too. So
I've told patients years ago. I've told patients years ago kind of what you're talking about. If you some patient with a cancer diagnosis, to think that they can just do one thing might not work. Like I'll take this magic supplement.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about spokes on a wheel, like a bicycle wheel. If you put one spoke in there, not so good. The more spokes you add, exercise, detox, supplements, anything you can do that you can afford to do. And some of the things that you can do aren't that expensive. But the more spokes you have on that wheel, the more solid that wheel is, and the greater your chances of recovering.
That's exactly right. And, exercise is very important to keep the lymphatic system moving. And my teacher used to say, if you just walking 30 minutes every day, that fully activates your lymphatic system. And, people go, well, I can't. But, that's why I started walking. At first, I couldn't walk very well, but I was going to do something at least for 30 minutes. And I was going to do deep breathing. And it made sense. The oxygen is important. And just to keep moving, and, lifting light weights and things like that have been shown to help. And, I think sometimes people try to overdo things. So, be kind to yourself, but like Dr. Rick said, that wheel, that's a good example. It's just fill that wheel up as much as you can and afford to do. And you need to detoxify, because when you're doing all this, your body's getting all this stuff is starting to build up in your system, and you need to start giving it a little relief. Take a little of the load off the liver too. So, that's why I like colonics, or coffee enemas are okay too. A lot of people love coffee enemas. I just, I have a colonic machine in my home, and I just, I try to go in about once a week, and, just because it just, I take a lot of stuff, and it's just, most people would say, oh, I ain't doing all that, but I just do it because, I think it's good. So
no, I'm a big believer in coffee enemas, and they stimulate the liver through the portal vein, the large intestine, then the liquid is reabsorbed back through the portal vein, goes back to the liver, and it causes the liver to do a little spasm and release its toxins. So it's
you feel so much better after you've been on, like a lot of supplements, and maybe you're on some chelator or something for heavy metals. Some people take, and that seems to work good for heavy metals too. But just get on there and just help everything out a little bit, and you feel freed up, and then you feel like you're raring to go again. It's a good thing. But you gotta replenish the good bacteria and all that, because you're stripping a lot of that out. So it's all a process.
You've given me a lot of time today, which I really appreciate. You said 30, is it 37 years now?
37 years since I was diagnosed. And it seems like I don't think it seems that long. Sometimes it does. but yeah, I mean, it's just, I've been lucky to be in pretty good health, and I try to do as much as I can, but I don't have, it's like hard. I mean, I've got a business, and I do this and other things that you have to take care of, but you do as much as you can, even maybe I've survived and overcame, the hard part, but it's like, I want to stay around for hopefully quite a while, and try to help as many people as I can. That's kind of what it's all about, because I never really know what's the purpose in my life. I'm like, oh, I had this. How could this happen to me? I had a lot going, and now, and you start feeling like, God, I'm being punished and all that. But then you start thinking, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. I'm feeling good now, and then you start thinking, these people start dying close to you and stuff, and you say, what am I supposed to do? And then all of a sudden it just says, I'm supposed to be giving back. I'm supposed to I got a story. Why not try to help as many people? It just feels right. It's a good feeling, and I'll do it as long as I can, because, and it's important for me to not, be out there selling anything. It's just, doing what I try to support what I do here because it takes, 2 or 3 people to help me, some of the things we do, but, support it with my other business. And, I don't want to even mention that, because that's not what I'm about. So it's,
and that's why I've always respected you too. You don't come on here selling, and there's no, I always look for that when I look for somebody talking about some kind of somebody that's going to help people with, especially something like cancer. And then you kind of got to scrutinize, what are they selling? What is their motives? And that's what I've always respected about you.
I mean, I could tell some people some maybe brands and stuff, but I don't even really like doing that, because I'm not an affiliate. I'm not I don't get a dime from anything. And I mean, a lot of people are, and that's okay. There's no law against it. I just, I make a living doing something else. And it's like, I don't need to do that. And I don't, it's kind of like, I'm sincere, and that's all that matters. I want to, people to know that I'm, I feel for them, and, I'm glad to answer any questions. I'll tell them, if they want to know, but I don't like to, well, every once in a while I'll mention a product maybe, but I don't like to do that, because, it's, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give people something leaving with you. You're going to give a lot of people hope. And we talk about prevention. Now, we can't get into all the ins and outs, because there's so many things that you can do. But I want people to know that you did it one way. The other person, it astounds me as it has you, how many different avenues people have taken to beat this. And many people didn't get any conventional treatment that do. Some didn't do the macrobiotic. Some did something else. I want to leave people today with, we've got an amazing story, 37-year survivor of stage 4 melanoma, who was, basically given a 20% chance of living, and here he is 37 years later. So, do you have anything you want to say before we go? Anything?
Well, I always like to let people know that, and I say this a lot, but look, check out, other survivor stories on the internet, and check out, what we have, I guess, on our Templeton Wellness. It's like you just gotta do your homework and roll up your sleeves. And, if I can get well and they can get well and survive for 30 or more years, then why can't you? That's the thing. It's just, you got to understand, you got to find something you really can believe in, because I believe that believing is over 50% of it. I really believe that. And you're not going to believe if you're been thrown a lot of negativity towards you and fear, because where you feel like, oh, I got to go back all the time. They're constantly looking for something. And
Yes.
That's me. That's just my thing. And I want to work with somebody, if I'm going to work with somebody, that thinks like I do more, and feels the same way I do about it. And just go out there and you'll find something, but you'll know in your heart when you find it. And you pray about it, meditate about it, go for a walk in the woods and think about it. Go away by yourself. Sometimes you need to be alone for a while sometimes, and to make decisions, or because other people are always going to pressure you to, come up with something. And I think sometimes just you and the maker, is sometimes you get the best answers, because we're here for a reason, and there's a reason that we're all here. And maybe the reason is that you're supposed to help others, just like I'm trying to do. I'm not going to be around forever, and there's people younger and younger getting sick all the time nowadays. There's a lot more toxic overload and things that we have to deal with nowadays, and a lot more stress, a lot more just everything. So anyway, I guess that's all I can really say.
All right, James, it has been a real pleasure.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if the true word is a fan, but I'm a fan of yours since you started your website, and I really appreciate you being with us today. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you, Dr. Rick, and you got a good thing going there. I love it. I love your way, the way you present yourself also, and you're very knowledgeable. And I don't know about a lot of the work you're doing, but I'm sure you're doing some good work. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me.
Appreciate it.
You take care.
You too.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. Janet Summer was no stranger to disease. As a teenager, she was at her mother's bedside when she lost a grueling battle with lung cancer. As a career nurse, Janet had cared for patients fighting every type of illness. So she was very careful to take care of her own body. Janet was active, she ate well, and she never smoked as her mother had done. Caring for her 2 boys while working full-time at the hospital kept her plenty busy. Janet was so engaged with day-to-day responsibilities that it likely took her longer than normal to notice what felt like an annoying pressure in her chest. By the time she had one of her colleagues take a serious look, the damage had long been done.
My mom was a smoker. In fact, I think women at that period of time in the 50s smoked to keep their weight down. Even after her diagnosis, her physician recommended that she not stop smoking, that it would be too stressful for her.
When my mother was dying of cancer, my sister Janet, she was the one who went to the hospital every day and took care of her.
I know when my mom was sick, how she looked, how from the chemo she had lost her hair, how emaciated she was, how she gasped for every breath. I always said as a nurse I would never do chemo, never. But when it was my turn, when I was faced with death, I jumped at it. I thought I have to do something. I can't just sit here and die. Very quickly, my breathing turned the same way, and from the chemo I had lost my hair, and I was extremely thin. So I could see that I was following in her footsteps, absolutely, that I would die that same agonizing death she died.
Janet lost her mother when she was just 19 years old, and the trauma of that experience convinced her to go into nursing. It also brought her siblings closer together.
As little kids, we were, my sister and I were very close.
But very different. I was much more outgoing. I was the cheerleader. I was the prom queen. Janet was always kind of behind the scenes, a little bit more like motherly.
When we went to college, we went to separate places. We did our own thing.
We stayed close and we stayed in touch, but as usual, as you're growing up, your interests change.
But as we married, then we became close again.
Janet and her husband Robert had 2 sons, Ryan and Scott. The boys always knew they could count on Mom.
She was always really close to my brother and I. You could tell that she definitely, loved us a lot.
She was young, but she even acted younger than she was. She was always right there with us every step of the way.
She was always very healthy. She took care of herself. She was very active. She was involved in aerobics, and she was involved in playing tennis. We were active as a family. We went boating and water skied.
Janet and Robert began to grow apart and eventually divorced. They agreed it was important for both to remain involved in their sons' lives.
Obviously a divorce is a difficult situation for kids, but they always remain close just for us, and they've always lived close.
Even though we're divorced, we are good friends. We're obviously relatively close neighbors. The family dynamics, in this case, they work.
Once I was divorced, I was working full-time, so a lot of my time was spent away from the home. It was very stressful in that, and I had little time to go to the boys' activities anymore.
Janet was able to adjust mentally to the long hours, but physically, the stress was quietly taking its toll.
I was 45 years old, working as a nurse in the hospital, and I noticed that I had some heaviness in my chest. Not a big deal, but just some heaviness along my sternum. It really felt like someone had 2 fists pushing against my sternum as firmly as they could. My first thought was bronchitis, and I had one of the doctors listen at work to my lungs. I said, maybe I have pneumonia or something. She said, no, your lungs are clear.
I don't remember her actually sharing the discomfort part. I remember her saying she didn't feel that well, but I think you probably have that conversation with your friends or your family, and you don't really think anything of it.
And the next day I would have another physician listen, because it truly was such pressure just along the sternum, the center of my chest. I called a friend of mine who I played tennis with, a physician, and I said, could he give me an antibiotic? And he said, sure, he'd give me an antibiotic, but he wanted me to get a chest x-ray to make sure that there was nothing else going on. Then I went to work on Monday. We did the chest x-ray, and the radiologist called me and said, let's do another one. And I teased them about not being able to even do one chest x-ray right, thinking that I was absolutely fine. And they repeated the chest x-ray.
We looked at the x-ray. The examination wasn't that critical. I got some blood work. I had her get a CAT scan of the chest, and then we reviewed the CAT scan.
That afternoon, we scanned me to find 3 tumors actually in the left lung, 7 in the right, 3 in my liver, 1 in my pancreas, a mass in my abdomen.
And she came immediately to me, her friend, and shared with me the shock of what she'd been told. And of course, we were both in disbelief, and immediately you believe it can't be so, and tests will prove otherwise.
The first oncologist told me I would live 3 to 6 months. And I thought, I can't be that sick. I'm not that sick. I'm a healthy person. I'm not a smoker, as my mom was a smoker. I certainly trusted him, but I was going to get a second opinion. And he said, yes, you should. You should definitely get a second opinion. And I can remember when I went for the second opinion, and I said, how long do you think I have? And he said, probably 3 to 6 weeks. 3 to 6 weeks. That's when I started thinking, I can't clean up my house in 3 to 6 weeks. How could I end my life in 3 to 6 weeks?
Janet Summer was living a happy, healthy life. Then, in her mid-40s, doctors told her she was riddled with cancerous tumors and she'd be dead within a month.
I said to my sister, I'm only going to live a couple more weeks. And she was great. She said, "No, he's wrong." And she hugged me, and it was great. I needed someone to be positive then. And she just kept her arms around me there in the lobby till the car came, and then we walked outside.
You don't know really what to do for a person at that point. You don't know if you can hug them and tell them it'll be okay. And I'm sure I tried to tell her it's probably not real, it's probably wrong, but we've all been touched by cancer, so you just try and hold on and comfort the person who's been given that terrible news.
I told my dad that I had lung cancer, and I hated to tell him because he had watched my mom, of course, die of lung cancer.
The word cancer is a word that frightens many people, and obviously it was frightening to me, and immediately I thought, you know, what is the impact it's going to have on all of us?
I decided to go back to the first oncologist because at least he was giving me 3 to 6 months. 10 days later, we did abdominal surgery. We removed an abdominal mass. Fortunately for me, this mass was attached to the retroperitoneal wall, which is the back wall of the abdominal cavity. So I didn't have to lose any part of my intestines or a piece of my liver or anything like that. They could remove this mass and still leave me whole.
Janet and Robert decided not to tell the boys about her illness until she had all the facts of her case. They waited until after her abdominal surgery to deliver the bad news.
I remember being at school and, her saying we need to talk. Anytime somebody says we need to talk, you know that you don't really want to talk because you got to bring up more serious matters.
Ryan was home from school. Scott, because he was in high school, was in the area. And my ex-husband and my 2 sons came over, and we sat here in my living room.
This was a whole new experience for Janet and myself, reacting to their reaction.
My older son, I can remember tears going down his cheeks, where Scott, nothing, just looking down.
At that young age, it was easier just to kind of ignore it, almost in a way. It was kind of like, well, if I don't really focus on it, then it probably isn't as real.
Their reactions were of great sadness and anger, and again, somewhat confusion because, they had not been exposed to cancer. They only had their mother and father basically describing what had happened and what was likely to happen.
I did believe that the boys would be fine. I trust their dad. I knew he was a good dad and that they would be fine with them. I was sad for myself. I was sad that I would not see them grow up. I would not see the partner they chose for their life. I would not be a grandma. Those were things that made me extremely sad.
I couldn't stand for her to die. My sister and my brother are my family, and I decided that I would do absolutely anything anyone asked me to help my sister live.
Janet felt she had no other choice but to try chemotherapy. The protocol called for 6 doses.
Pretty much from that point on, Jan went downhill at a very rapid rate. She quickly lost weight. She got sick, she got gray. It didn't even look like she'd live a couple weeks.
I vomited day and night. I would have a sip of water and that would induce 45 minutes of throwing up. Within 3 weeks, I'd lost 1/3 of my weight. I weighed 72 pounds.
We had brought her in the hospital several times because of symptom control, just unable to breathe. I think we drained lots of fluid from her lung. And so, we basically put her on hospice care.
The oncologist came to see me in the hospital and he said, we can start the second treatment while you're right here. And I said, well, let me think about it. And my internist came in, Dr. Grossman, and he said, probably don't do the second treatment. He said, it is so harsh and you are so fragile right now that second dose might kill you before the cancer would kill you.
But in the back of my mind, I thought, well, there must be something else that we could certainly offer her, at least in the short term.
And I said, well, what would I do? I can't just give up. And he said, had I ever considered alternative medicine? I said, I really thought that was for hippies. I being a nurse myself, I didn't consider it part of what I would do if I were sick.
Dennis suggested that we try a macrobiotic diet.
At this point, she was so ill that she wasn't eating. The macrobiotics was a way of increasing the body's immune system and at least get some nutrition from.
I thought, Yes, I have to try something because I was not going to die like my mom died. I was not going to die like many people die of actually chemotoxicity, more so than the cancer. I wanted to die with dignity.
When he suggested this macrobiotic diet, I jumped on it immediately. I went and looked in the phone book for the Macrobiotic Center of Cleveland. I started hunting down different teachers.
We looked up macrobiotics and we sort of like winged it. You know, I stopped a lot of the foods that I traditionally ate and we started making miso soup. And so I was eating very, very tiny bits. In fact, what I ate within 24 hours would probably fit a teacup.
Nancy's quest to learn more about the diet led her to macrobiotic counselor Francois Roland.
When I saw Janet, they already had begun to learn about macrobiotics, but they wanted to make sure it was the right way to do it.
When I saw Francois walk into the room, here was this tall, slender man, and I thought, I don't want to be that thin. Here I was dying, gasping for breath, sitting on the couch, and I'm judging a tall, thin man. That was my first initial judgment, how much I judged people, how different my heart is today than it was then. And he came in and gave a consultation.
Even though she was tired, weak, she still had a lot of vital energy in her. And she realized that actually the chemotherapy was harming her more than her real condition. She had a lot of health in her body that needed to be reawakened.
A week later, Francois came back and did a cooking class. 8 of my friends and Dr. Grossman came to this cooking class.
Healing through food was new to me, as it was to her, and we just had to believe that that could occur, and we did.
My philosophy was that, you know, if you were in such a desperate strait and somebody offered you something that could at least help your nutrition, your comfort level, and granted this is not FDA approved or anything, but we're not talking about taking a cure, we're just talking about supplementing the immune system.
Following that class, we set up a calendar in my kitchen, and my girlfriends would sign up for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and overnight. Because I was single at the time, I really needed 24-hour coverage. And 8 of my friends, including my sister, covered me for 18 months, 24 hours a day.
We just lived the whole macrobiotic lifestyle, and it almost seemed like she responded instantly. And by that, I don't mean some kind of grandiose response. What I mean is, like, every now and then, she actually took a deep breath.
We tried to believe we knew what we were doing, but we were all frightened. We weren't familiar with the vegetables, so we would all gather in the kitchen and look through the refrigerator and wonder what was the collard greens and what was the kale and what was the kohlrabi and what was each vegetable that was new to us in our process. And we would wonder and share, and she would listen to us in the kitchen whispering about maybe it's this, maybe it's that. We would refer to the books and we would fortunately make the correct choices.
She had quite a loving network of people.
It's amazing that my friends would give up that much of their life for me. I always knew how much I loved my friends. I just didn't know how much they loved me.
The idea behind macrobiotics is to eat clean, healthy foods, which in turn fortify the body with the nutrition it needs, while flushing out toxins that take a toll on the immune system. This cleansing process rejuvenates the blood, so the body can aggressively and efficiently fight disease.
Seeing her start on this diet was a bit traumatic just because I didn't expect it would work. At the time, I didn't understand all the changes that can happen in the body by altering your diet this way.
The diet seemed to benefit Janet immediately, but her cancer was so advanced that it looked as if it might be too little, too late.
My lungs filled with fluid, and I would go into the hospital, and they would do what's called a thoracentesis. And they would drain like 1 or 2 liters of fluid off my lungs. Following that, they would do a chest x-ray to see if I had pneumothorax, which is a collapsing of the lung. But fortunately, I did not, but we would see that the tumors were growing.
Janet started to cry, and she said that she wanted to die, that it was too much.
And she just, on her knees next to me, please don't die. And so I thought, all right, I'll try it one more day. And then the next day would come, and it wouldn't be as bad as that day, or at least not start out as bad. So it really was a one day at a time journey, but I knew it was up to me. I could let go, and it could be over.
And each day she kept getting better. And then she got into it with gusto. She made the commitment.
Despite the setback, Janet was encouraged to continue on with her fight.
After 5 months, we saw that the tumor started to shrink.
The radiologist would call me and say, the lung looks better.
And the radiologist would say, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. This is working.
Janet persevered with her strict macrobiotic diet. Frequent CT scans showed her tumors were shrinking, until one day, the tumors had completely disappeared.
When I heard that my tumors were gone, of course I was elated. It was almost unbelievable. Almost as unbelievable as when I heard they were first there, given such a poor prognosis. And now here it is, a year later, and now I'm tumor-free. It was really almost hard to take in.
When she first told me that she had seen the doctor and he had told her that the tumors were now gone, I was absolutely shocked.
There was no trace of cancer left in her body. That was, of course, very heartening to hear that.
She's so healthy and vibrant now, you would never have even thought she was ill, let alone so ill that they were giving her weeks to live.